Ambassador Xyleth had been living on Earth for 3 years. He came from a planet called Kolvarn, and his people were tall, thin, and had blue skin. They were known across the galaxy as calm and logical beings. Nothing surprised them. Nothing scared them. They had seen everything, or so Xyleth thought. His job was simple. He had to watch humans and write reports about them. He had to tell his government what humans were like. Were they dangerous? Were they smart? Could they be trusted? These were the questions his superiors wanted answered. For 3 years, Xyleth watched humans carefully. He ate their food. He learned their languages. He attended their meetings and their parties. He even learned to enjoy their strange drink called coffee. Humans were odd creatures. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest. They did not live very long compared to other races. Their technology was good, but not the best. On paper, they seemed ordinary, but Xyleth noticed something strange about them. They did not act the way they should. When faced with danger, most species would run or hide or surrender. Humans did something different. They smiled. They laughed. They made jokes about dying. Xyleth did not understand this at all. The incident that changed everything happened on a ship called the Horizon. It was a large human vessel that traveled between stars. Xyleth was on board as a guest. The humans were taking him to a meeting on another planet. It was supposed to be a simple trip. The dinner that night was pleasant. Xyleth sat at a long table with human officers and other alien guests. They ate food and drank wine and talked about politics and trade. Everything was normal. Then the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. A loud voice came through the speakers. It said that there was a problem with the reactor. The magnetic field that held the reactor together was failing. If it failed completely, the entire ship would explode. Xyleth felt cold fear run through his body. He looked around the table. The other aliens were panicking. Some were crying. Some were praying to their gods. One ambassador from a planet called Drellic actually fainted, but the humans were different. They stopped eating. They listened to the alarm. Then they started moving with purpose. No screaming. No crying. Just action. The captain, a woman named Linda Cross, stood up from the table. She was short with gray hair and calm eyes. She spoke into her communicator and asked for a status report. The news was bad. Very bad. The magnetic coils inside the reactor were breaking down. Someone needed to go inside the reactor chamber and fix them by hand. But the reactor was still running. The radiation inside would kill anyone who entered within minutes. Even the best radiation suit would not protect them for long. The logical choice was to evacuate. Get everyone to the escape pods and abandon the ship. That was what any sensible species would do. Captain Cross asked if anyone could fix the coils from outside the chamber. The answer was no. She asked if they could shut down the reactor first. The answer was also no. Shutting it down would take too long. The field would collapse before they finished. Then a voice came from the back of the room. I can do it. Everyone turned to look. A man was standing near the door. He was short and thick with messy brown hair and hands covered in grease. His uniform was dirty. He looked like he had been working on machines all day. His name was Danny Cole. He was the chief engineer. Captain Cross looked at him. The radiation will kill you, she said. Danny shrugged. Maybe not. I have done stupid things before. This is not stupid. This is suicide. Danny walked over to the table. A young woman was sitting there. Her name was Katie Bell. She was his assistant. She was holding a glass of water, but Danny ignored it. He reached past her and grabbed his beer. He had left it there before the alarm started. He looked at the beer for a moment. Then he handed it back to Katie. Hold my beer, he said. Xyleth did not understand. What did beer have to do with anything? Why was this man giving away his drink before going to die? Katie took the beer. She did not argue. She did not cry. She just nodded and said, I will keep it cold for you. Danny smiled and walked out of the room. Xyleth followed him to the engineering deck. He did not know why. Something about the situation felt important. He needed to see what would happen. Danny put on a radiation suit. It was old and patched in several places. Not a good suit? Not the kind of suit you would trust with your life. But Danny did not seem to care. He walked up to the reactor chamber door. A screen next to it showed the radiation levels inside. The numbers were very high. High enough to kill a Corvani in seconds. High enough to kill a human in minutes. Danny looked at the numbers. He looked at the door. Then he opened it and walked inside. The door closed behind him. Xyleth watched through a small window. The light inside the chamber was blinding. Danny was just a dark shape moving through the glow. He walked slowly, carefully. Toward the center where the coils were located, the minutes passed. 5, 10, 20, 30. Other crew members gathered around Xyleth. They watched in silence. Some of them were praying. Others were just staring. No one spoke. After 40 minutes, the alarm stopped. The screen showed that the magnetic field was stable again. The coils were fixed. The ship was safe. The reactor chamber door opened and Danny Cole walked out. He was alive. His suit was smoking. His skin was red and burned. He could barely stand. But he was alive. He walked over to Katie Bell, who was still holding his beer. He took it from her hand and drank the whole thing in one long gulp. Then he wiped his mouth and said, "Someone should probably take me to medical." He collapsed 2 seconds later. The medical team rushed him to the hospital bay. They worked on him for hours. The radiation had damaged his body badly. Any other species would have died. The doctor said it was impossible that he survived, but Danny Cole did survive. He woke up 3 days later and asked for another beer. Xyleth wrote a very long report that night. He described everything he had seen, the calm way the humans reacted, the way Danny handed over his beer, the impossible survival. He sent the report to his government with a warning. He said that humans were more dangerous than anyone realized, not because of their weapons or their ships, but because they did not think like normal beings. They did not fear death the way they should. That report spread through the galaxy like fire. Every species read it. Every government discussed it. And for the first time, the galaxy began to wonder what exactly humans were capable of. The phrase, "hold my beer," appeared in that report 17 times. Nobody forgot it. The Galactic Intelligence Consortium was the largest spy organization in the known universe. It had agents on every planet. It watched every species. It knew secrets that governments wanted to keep hidden. Nothing escaped its attention. After Ambassador Xyleth sent his report about Danny Cole, the consortium became very interested in humans. They created a special unit just to study them. They called it the Human Observation Division. For 50 years, this division watched humans carefully. They recorded their behavior. They studied their culture. They analyzed their language. And they noticed something very strange. The phrase, "hold my beer," kept appearing in their records. At first, the analysts thought it was just a saying, just words that humans used when they were being foolish. But then they looked closer. They checked the data. They ran the numbers. What they found was disturbing. Over 400 incidents had been recorded where a human said, "hold my beer," or something similar. In every single case, the human then did something that should have been impossible. They survived accidents that should have killed them. They solved problems that had no solutions. They broke rules that physics said could not be broken. The consortium did not believe in magic. They believed in science and logic. But the data was clear. Something happened to humans when they said those words. Something that no one could explain. Commander Vex Torin was a soldier from the Sindari Empire. His people were warriors. They had fought in 1,000 battles across 100 worlds. They respected strength and courage. They did not respect foolishness. When Vex first heard about the human reports, he laughed. He thought it was a joke. How could a simple phrase make someone stronger or smarter? It made no sense. Then he met a human named Zach Mercer. Zach was a cargo pilot. He flew a small ship that carried supplies between planets. He was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He was just a man who delivered packages for money, Vex was assigned to travel with Zack on a routine mission. They were taking medical supplies to a colony on the outer edge of explored space. It was supposed to be an easy trip. Nothing dangerous. Nothing exciting, but the universe had other plans. Halfway to the colony, they ran into an asteroid field. Not a normal asteroid field. This was a Class 7 field, the most dangerous kind. The rocks were everywhere. They were moving fast and crashing into each other. Some of them were bigger than ships. Some were smaller than fists. All of them were deadly. The ship's computer calculated their chances of getting through. The screen showed 0%. Not 1%. Not 0.5%. 0. Vex felt fear for the first time in many years. He was a warrior. He had faced death many times, but always in battle, where he could fight back. Here, there was nothing to fight. Just rocks and darkness and death. He looked at Zack. The human was staring at the asteroid field through the window. His face was calm, too calm. He did not look afraid at all. "We should turn back," Vex said. "Find another route." Zack shook his head. "The colony needs these supplies now? People are dying. We do not have time to go around." "But the computer says we cannot get through." Zack smiled. It was a strange smile. The kind of smile that Vex had seen on crazy people. The kind of smile that said common sense did not apply here. Zack reached into a small cooler next to his seat. He pulled out a bottle of beer. He looked at it for a moment, then handed it to Vex. "Hold this," he said. Vex took the beer without thinking. He was confused. Why was this human giving him a drink? What was happening? Then Zack turned off the autopilot. He grabbed the manual controls, and he flew the ship straight into the asteroid field. What happened next was something Vex would never forget. He would tell the story 1,000 times over the next 300 years of his life. He would tell it to soldiers and kings and children. And every time people would think he was lying, Zack flew like no one Vex had ever seen. He moved the ship between rocks that were centimeters apart. He spun the vessel on 3 axes at once, sliding through gaps that looked too small to pass. He used the gravity of larger asteroids to sling the ship around corners. He predicted where rocks would collide and timed his movements to slip through the debris. At one point, a massive asteroid broke apart directly in front of them. There was no way around the fragments. No way over or under. Zack flew straight through, weaving between the pieces like a dancer moving through raindrops. Vex held onto his seat with all 4 of his arms. He forgot to breathe. He forgot to think. He just watched as this ordinary human did the impossible. 18 minutes. That was how long it took to cross the field. 18 minutes of pure insanity. When they came out the other side, the ship was barely scratched. A few marks on the hull. Nothing serious. Zack leaned back in his seat and let out a long breath. He looked tired but happy, like he had just finished a game instead of cheating death. Vex stared at him. His hands were shaking. His hearts were beating too fast. He could not believe what had just happened. "How?" he asked. "How did you do that?" "The computer said it was impossible." Zack laughed. "The computer never delivered pizzas in Chicago." "What does that mean?" "It means I have driven through worse traffic than this. At least the asteroids were not honking at me." Vex did not understand the joke, but he understood something else. He understood why the consortium was afraid of humans. It was not their weapons. It was not their ships. It was this madness. This refusal to accept that something could not be done. He looked down at the beer in his hands. It was still cold. He had held it the entire time without realizing it. "Do you want this back?" he asked. Zack took the beer and opened it. He took a long drink and smiled. "Thanks for holding it. You are good luck?" Vex filed his report that night. He confirmed everything the consortium had suspected. The phrase, "hold my beer," was not just words. It was a warning sign. It meant that a human was about to do something crazy. Something dangerous. Something that no sane being would attempt. The consortium added the incident to their database. They compared it with the other 400 cases. They looked for patterns and found them. Every time a human said, Hold my beer. The rules changed. Probability stopped working. Common sense stopped applying. The impossible became possible. The consortium did not know why this happened. They had theories. Some scientists thought it was a chemical reaction in the human brain. Others thought it was a cultural thing, a belief so strong that it changed reality. Whatever the reason, the result was clear. Humans were unpredictable in a way that no other species had ever been. And the galaxy was not ready for them. The report spread to every government in the consortium. It reached admirals and generals and presidents. It reached kings and queens and emperors, and for the first time, the galaxy began to truly fear those three little words, hold my beer. The Unified Galactic Council was the most powerful organization in the known universe. It included representatives from 37 different species. They made laws. They settled disputes. They decided the fate of entire worlds. When the council received the reports about humans, they called an emergency meeting. This had only happened 5 times in the history of the galaxy. The last time was when a species called the Vorth tried to eat a sun. This meeting was about something more dangerous. This meeting was about humans. High Arbiter Morath sat at the center of the Great Chamber. He was ancient, even by galactic standards. His body was made of living crystal, and his voice sounded like wind blowing through caves. He had led the council for over 1,000 years. We are here to discuss what the reports call the human unpredictability factor, he said. We have received data from the Intelligence Consortium. We have witness statements from over 400 incidents. We need to decide what to do about this threat. The representatives murmured among themselves. Some looked worried. Some looked confused. Some looked angry. A tall being named Krath stood up. He was from the Vrixen people, a species known for their logic and their love of rules. They believed that everything in the universe could be calculated. I have studied the reports, Krath said. I do not believe them. What they describe is impossible. No species can ignore probability. No species can break the laws of physics just by saying words. And yet the evidence is clear, replied a small creature named Lys. She was from the Morani, a species that looked like floating balls of light. 400 incidents. Hundreds of witnesses. The data does not lie, then the witnesses are lying. I was one of those witnesses. The chamber went silent. Lys floated higher so everyone could see her glow. I was on a station near human space when a meteor struck our reactor core. We had 3 minutes before it exploded. Evacuation was not possible. We were all going to die. She paused and let the silence grow. A human engineer was visiting the station. Her name was Carol Webb. She looked at the damage and said it could be fixed. We told her it was impossible. There was not enough time. The tools were wrong. The damage was too great. What did she do? Asked Morath. She handed her coffee to my assistant and said, "Hold my coffee." Then she walked into the reactor room. She fixed the core with nothing but wire and tape and pure stubbornness. She saved 300 lives. And where is this Carol Webb now? She went back to her ship and took a nap. She said fixing reactors always made her sleepy. The chamber exploded with noise. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded proof. Others demanded action. A few suggested that humans should be destroyed before they became too dangerous. Morath raised a crystal arm, and silence returned. We will hear from the expert, he said. Xenopsychologist Kel Vathos has spent 20 years studying human behavior. She will explain what we are dealing with. A woman made of shadow and smoke rose from her seat. Kel Vathos was from a species that existed between dimensions. She could see into the minds of other beings. She could read their thoughts and emotions. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she said. Her voice was soft but carried through the entire chamber. I have studied humans extensively. I have lived among them. I have looked inside their minds. And I can tell you that the reports are true. Explain, said Krath. How can saying words change reality? The words do not change reality. The words change the human. She moved to the center of the chamber and created an image in the air. It showed a human brain glowing with activity. Most species experience fear when faced with danger. This is normal. Fear keeps you alive. It tells you to run or hide or surrender. But humans are different. When they face danger that seems impossible, something strange happens in their brains. The image changed. New areas of the brain lit up with bright colors. They become excited. Instead of fear, they feel challenge. Instead of despair, they feel determination. Their brains release chemicals that make them stronger, faster, and smarter. Pain becomes distant. Doubt disappears. They enter a state of pure focus. That is just adrenaline, said Krath. Many species have similar reactions. No, this is different. Adrenaline makes you faster, but also makes you sloppy. Humans become both faster and more precise. They think clearer than normal. They see options that they would normally miss. They become, for a short time, the best possible version of themselves. And the phrase triggers this state? The phrase is a cultural signal. It tells the human brain that impossible odds have been accepted, that fear has been rejected, that the challenge has been chosen. When a human says, "Hold my beer," they are telling themselves that they are about to do something amazing. The chamber was quiet. Representatives looked at each other with new understanding and new fear. "So what do we do?" asked Liz. "We cannot change their biology. We cannot stop them from saying words." "We can prepare," said Morath. "We can create protocols. We can establish warning systems." For 17 days, the council debated. They argued about solutions. They discussed options. They reviewed the data again and again. Finally, they reached a decision. They called it Protocol 17, named for the 17 days of debate. The protocol was simple but radical. Any monitoring system that detected a human saying, "Hold my beer," or any similar phrase would immediately trigger a maximum threat alert. All nearby vessels would be warned to keep their distance. All recording devices would be turned on. All emergency response teams would be put on standby, because when a human said those words, something impossible was about to happen. The galaxy needed to be ready. Some representatives thought the protocol was too extreme. They said it was based on fear and superstition. They said the council was overreacting. Others said the protocol was not extreme enough. They said humans were too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space. They said the phrase should be banned entirely, but most representatives agreed that Protocol 17 was necessary. The evidence was too strong to ignore. The risk was too great to dismiss. Morath announced the decision at the end of the 17th day. "Protocol 17 is now galactic law," he said. "Every species, every government, every ship and station will implement these procedures. When humans say, 'Hold my beer,' we will be watching. We will be recording. We will be prepared." He paused and looked around the chamber at the 37 species gathered there. "We do not know what humans will do next. But we know they will surprise us. We know they will do the impossible. And we know that a small phrase will warn us before it happens. Let us hope we are ready." The protocol spread across the galaxy within hours. Every government received a copy. Every military updated their systems. Every monitoring station added new keywords to their alert programs. The phrase, "Hold my beer," became the most watched phrase in the history of the universe, and somewhere, on a small planet called Earth, a human named Greg Hill handed his drink to his friend and said, "Hey, watch this. 3 star systems away." An alarm started blinking. The Vraxian horde came from the dark spaces between galaxies. They were insects, but not the small kind that crawl on floors. They were monsters. Each soldier stood 3 meters tall with 6 legs and mandibles that could cut through steel. They ate other species. Not just killed them, ate them. They believed it was their right to consume all life in the universe. For 10,000 years, the Vraxians had swept across space like a wave of death. They had destroyed 200 civilizations. They had eaten billions of beings. No one had ever stopped them. When their fleet appeared near Kepler Station, the galaxy held its breath. Kepler Station was a research facility at the edge of explored space. It was home to 12,000 scientists and civilians from 19 different species. They studied stars and planets and the mysteries of the universe. They were not soldiers. They had no army. The Vraxian fleet numbered over 300 warships. The largest was called the Devourer, and it was the size of a small moon. It carried the Vraxian Queen, a creature so old and powerful that she had personally eaten the rulers of 30 worlds. Station Commander Beth Nolan received the Vraxian transmission at exactly noon. The message was simple: surrender and be eaten quickly. Resist and be eaten slowly. There was no third option. Beth was 47 years old. She had gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many hard decisions. She had been a soldier once, long ago. Now she was supposed to protect scientists and their families. She looked at her tactical display. 40 security officers. 2 small patrol craft. 1 destroyer called the Relentless, which had been damaged in a recent accident and could barely fly, against 300 warships. The math was simple. They were all going to die. Beth called her senior officers to the command center. There were 6 of them, including her communications officer, a young man named Pete Sawyer, who had never seen real combat. "Options?" she asked. "Evacuation is impossible," said her tactical officer. "They have us surrounded. Our ships would be destroyed before they cleared the station." "Surrender?" "The Vraxians do not take prisoners. Surrender just means they kill us without a fight. Then we fight." The officers looked at each other. They knew what that meant. They would lose. They would all die. But at least they would die fighting. Pete Sawyer had been holding a beer. He had grabbed it from the cafeteria that morning, planning to drink it after his shift. Now it seemed pointless to save it. He handed it to Beth. She looked at the bottle. She looked at the tactical display showing 300 enemy ships. She looked at her officers who were waiting for orders, then she smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just decided to stop worrying about losing. "Hold my beer," she said. Across the galaxy, Protocol 17 alerts started flashing. Every monitoring station within 3 light years received the warning. Maximum threat level. Human unpredictability detected. All vessels advised to maintain safe distance. But there was no safe distance from what came next. Beth Nolan began giving orders. Fast, clear, impossible orders. Shut down the main lights. Route all power to weapons and shields. Vent atmosphere in sections 7 through 12. Prepare the mining charges in the lower tunnels. Get me Dr. Franklin from the physics lab. I need to know if we can turn an electron microscope into a laser. Her officers moved. They did not question her. There was no time. The Vraxians were already launching boarding craft. The first wave of Vraxian soldiers hit the station 20 minutes later. They expected easy prey. Scientists and children. Soft targets. They found darkness and death. Beth had turned the station into a trap. The corridors were black as night. The Vraxians relied on sight to hunt, and in the dark they were confused. Human security teams moved through the shadows with infrared goggles, striking fast and disappearing. When the Vraxians tried to force their way through Section 7, Beth vented the atmosphere. Hundreds of soldiers were sucked into the vacuum of space, their bodies frozen before they could scream. When they tried to land more troops in the mining areas, Beth detonated the charges. The tunnels collapsed, burying thousands of soldiers under tons of rock. Dr. Franklin and his physics team had indeed turned their electron microscopes into weapons. They mounted them on maintenance drones and sent them hunting through the corridors. The beams could cut through Vraxian armor like paper. For 17 hours, Beth Nolan held the station against the greatest military force in galactic history. She used every trick she had ever learned. She invented new tricks on the spot. She turned a peaceful research station into a death trap that made the Vraxians pay for every meter they advanced. The Queen was not amused. She sent a message to Beth directly. Her voice was like metal scraping on stone. "Little human, you have killed many of my children, but there are always more. You cannot win. Surrender now, and I will eat you last." Beth looked at the message. She was exhausted. She had not slept in 2 days. She had watched good people die. She knew the Queen was right. Eventually, the Vraxians would overwhelm them, then she remembered something. Something from the old files. Something about Vraxian culture. She opened a channel to the Queen. "I challenge you," she said. "Single combat. Me against you. If I win, you leave. If you win, we surrender." There was a long silence. Then the Queen laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You challenge me? A tiny human against a queen who has ruled for 10,000 years? This is madness. This is Vraxian law. I have read your texts. Any leader can be challenged for their position. You cannot refuse without dishonoring your entire horde." Another silence. Longer this time. "Very well, little human. Come to my ship. We will fight. And when I eat you, I will take my time." Beth put on her combat armor. It was old and patched, but it still worked. She took a plasma cutter from the engineering bay. It was meant for cutting through ship hulls during repairs. It would have to do. Pete Sawyer met her at the airlock. "Commander, this is crazy. The Queen is 3 times your size. She has killed thousands in single combat." Beth took her beer back from him. It was warm now, but she drank it anyway. "I know," she said. "But she has never fought a human." The duel lasted 43 minutes. The Queen was bigger, stronger, and faster. Her mandibles could cut through steel. Her claws were poisoned. She had been fighting for 10,000 years, but Beth had something the Queen did not understand. She had the ability to refuse to accept defeat. Every time the Queen knocked her down, Beth got back up. Every time the Queen cut her, Beth kept fighting. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Her armor was falling apart. But she would not stop. And slowly, she learned. She saw patterns in the Queen's attacks. She noticed that the Queen relied too much on her mandibles. She always attacked from the front. She never expected prey to come closer. Beth stopped retreating. She charged forward, inside the Queen's reach, where the mandibles could not follow. She jammed her plasma cutter into the gap. Between the Queen's head and body, she activated it. The Queen's head fell to the floor. The Vraxians stared in shock. Their Queen, their immortal ruler, had been killed by a small human with a maintenance tool. According to Vraxian law, Beth was now their leader. She could have ordered them to serve her. She could have taken their ships and their worlds. Instead, she told them to leave and never come back. They left. When the relief fleet arrived 6 hours later, they found Beth sitting in her command chair. She was covered in blood and burns. She was barely conscious. But she was alive. In her hand was an empty beer bottle. The story spread across the galaxy within hours. The human who killed the Vraxian Queen, the commander who held a station against 300 ships. The woman who said, "Hold my beer," and changed history. Protocol 17 was updated that day. The threat level was increased. The warning radius was expanded. And the galaxy learned a new lesson about humans. They did not know how to give up. 50 years had passed since Protocol 17 was created. 50 years since the galaxy learned to fear 3 simple words. In that time, everything had changed. The phrase, "Hold my beer," had become the most monitored phrase in the history of the universe. Every government had listening stations dedicated to detecting it. Every military had response teams ready to react. Every intelligence agency had entire departments focused on tracking human behavior. Some species thought this was excessive. They said the galaxy was overreacting to a simple cultural phrase. They said humans were not that dangerous. Then they witnessed a human say those words. And they understood. Admiral Corax of the Sundari fleet had been skeptical for years. He was old and experienced. He had fought in 100 battles and won most of them. He did not believe in magic or superstition. He believed in weapons and tactics. Then he met a human pilot named Amy Scott. Amy was young, barely 25 years old by human counting. She flew a small fighter craft, the kind that was meant for patrol and escort duty. Nothing special. Nothing impressive. Corax's fleet was escorting a convoy through a dangerous part of space when pirates attacked. They were Vex Raiders, known for their speed and ruthlessness. 50 ships against his 12. The battle was going badly. Corax's ships were protecting the convoy, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. 2 of his destroyers were already crippled. The pirates were closing in. Then Amy Scott's voice came over the radio. "Admiral, I have an idea. But it is going to look really stupid." Corax watched as Amy's tiny fighter broke formation and headed straight toward the pirate flagship. The largest ship in the enemy fleet. The most heavily armed. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Hold my coffee, Admiral." "I did not bring beer today." Corax did not know what that meant. But every monitoring system in the sector suddenly showed maximum alert. Amy flew her fighter directly at the pirate flagship. Every gun on the ship fired at her. She dodged them all. She wove through the barrage like it was nothing. Like the lasers and missiles were standing still, then she did something impossible. She flew into the ship's engine exhaust port. The port was barely big enough for her fighter. The heat and radiation inside should have melted her instantly. The pressure should have crushed her, but she made it through. Inside the ship, she fired everything she had at the reactor core. The explosion tore the flagship apart from the inside. The blast took out 3 other pirate ships that were too close. Amy flew out through the debris, her fighter smoking and sparking. Half her systems were dead. Her cockpit was filled with warning lights. "Target destroyed," she said calmly. "I need a tow back to the fleet." The remaining pirates fled. They had just watched a single fighter destroy their flagship. They wanted no part of whatever magic the humans possessed. Corax stared at his tactical display for a long time. He had been a soldier for 200 years. He had never seen anything like that. He filed a report that night. In it, he wrote that he finally understood why the galaxy feared humans. It was not their technology. It was not their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept the word impossible. The story of Amy Scott joined hundreds of others in the galactic archives. Every species had their own collection of hold my beer stories now. They traded them like precious gems. They studied them like holy texts. The Corvani Ambassador Xylith's people had built universities dedicated to studying human psychology. Their greatest scholars spent their lives trying to understand why humans acted the way they did. The Sundari had changed their entire military doctrine. They now included human unpredictability as a factor in every battle plan. They trained their soldiers to expect the impossible when fighting alongside humans. Even the Morathai, a species that rarely left their homeworld, had started brewing beer. They believed that holding the drink while a human did something impossible would bring good fortune. Dr. Lavaw Simmons was a quantum physicist from a place called MIT. She had spent her life studying the smallest particles in the universe. Math was her language. Logic was her religion. One day, she faced an equation that no one could solve. It had been called impossible for 300 years. The greatest minds in the galaxy had tried and failed. Lavra looked at the equation for a long time. She thought about it. She dreamed about it. She ate breakfast while staring at it. Then she handed her coffee to her assistant and said, "Hold this. I think I see it." She worked for 6 hours straight. She filled 17 boards with calculations. She made leaps of logic that no one had ever attempted, and she solved it. The news spread across the galaxy instantly. A human had solved the Vardeshi equation. The problem that was supposed to be impossible, 3 star systems away. An evacuation alert had been issued because someone detected the phrase, "hold this," in a human context. When they learned it was just a physicist solving math, they felt foolish, but not too foolish. Because with humans, you never knew. Captain Ryan Drake was a cargo pilot, like Zach Mercer before him. He heard about his own fame by accident. He had been transporting supplies when his ship was caught in a black hole's gravity field. There was no escape. The math said he was dead. He handed his beer to his co-pilot and said, "Hold this. I'm going to try something." He flew his cargo ship into the accretion disk of a black hole and used the spin to slingshot himself free. The physics should not have allowed it. The heat should have destroyed him. The radiation should have killed everyone on board, but he made it when he landed safely at a station 3 days later. He discovered that his action had caused the Vraxian Empire to redirect their entire fleet away from human space. They had decided that any species capable of escaping a black hole was too dangerous to fight. Ryan asked if he could get that in writing for his resume. 50 years after Protocol 17, the galaxy had learned something important about humans. They were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest. They did not live the longest or build the best ships, but they had something no other species possessed. They had a cultural tradition of looking at impossible odds, handing off their drinks and then doing the impossible anyway. The phrase, "hold my beer," had become more than words. It was a warning. It was a promise. It was a declaration that the rules were about to change. The Galactic Council met every year to review Protocol 17. Every year they debated whether it was still necessary. Every year new incidents convinced them that it was. High Arbiter Morath, now ancient even by crystal standards, gave the same speech each time. We do not understand humans. Perhaps we never will. But we have learned to respect them. Not because of their weapons or their ships, but because when they say those 3 words, the universe itself seems to hold its breath. And then they do the impossible, every single time. The phrase, "hold my beer," was now translated into 4,000 languages. Every species knew what it meant. Every child learned about it in school, and somewhere. On 100 worlds, humans were handing their drinks to friends and saying, "Watch this." The galaxy was watching. It always would be, because when humans said, "hold my beer," anything could happen, and usually did.